Oh, there we go. Yeah. Yes, it sounds like it. We got it. I think it's working now. Yes. I love your sweater. Yeah, it's so fun. All my favorite things. Thrifted or gifted? Uh-oh. There we go. Some of you have heard me share some about my sabbatical already, and some of you haven't. There are a lot of gratitudes that go out. Perhaps you know that the planning for this trip started in like January, February 2023. And there was a team of people who worked together to put together an application grant that made this all possible. The grant paid for all of my family's travel. It paid for our interim minister for the summer, and covered some other expenses as well. The theme for the sabbatical was Ubuntu, which is this theme of belonging and the idea of belonging together. I think it's pretty amazing that we had a small group of folks in early 2023 who came up with a theme that felt more apt and more timely for me personally, for our congregation, for our world in the summer of 2025, even than it did when we thought of it. So there's a real gift and a real movement of the Spirit when something is able to flow in that way. You can have an idea. We've all had ideas. You can make a plan. We've all made plans. You can do a lot of legwork, and there was a lot of legwork that went into planning this sabbatical, but it simply isn't possible to expect that a plan that involves belonging, belovedness, and being welcomed back to a home where you haven't been in 35 years is going to happen. That's the Holy Spirit. And that was the sabbatical for me and my family. It was also the sabbatical for our congregation as we heard each other's testimonies, and for our interim Delaney Bay, who was blown away by your readiness to meet them and go. The number of times they said to me, the congregation was just like, let's do this. What a gift, and what an arms open wide, Holy Spirit led, just leap of faith and trust. I really, over the years, and especially now, have come to believe that this sort of gift comes only by way of the Holy Spirit. Openness, surrender, and trust, and we trusted. You all trusted, Delaney trusted, and I trusted. So we already talked about a bunch of the work that went into the sabbatical. That included the application grant, and tons of time went into that. We had additional people who read through the grant and edited it. We had people around the world. One of the things that we had to do with the grant was to submit a budget, like a line item budget for how much things were going to cost. So people around the world estimating things like the cost of a rental vehicle and gas, among other things. A job description had to be written for Delaney. Train tickets needed to be coordinated, flights needed to be booked, a summer season of worship needed to be planned, and also there was so much that was surrendered in trust. No guarantees, just preparation, prayer, and the Holy Spirit. So part of today is to say well done and thank you. I shared a little bit this morning in my reflection about what this trip meant for me. Let's see if I can get this. Takes a minute. There, oh, went way too far. There we go. So this is actually a photo I took. Amazing. There were, of course, the amazing animals and breathtaking scenery. In Zimbabwe, we stayed at a place called The Hide. It is a safari camp nestled in the heart of Hwange National Park. And we saw as many lions in 4 days as probably in the entire other 12 years that we had lived in Southern Africa. Our guide was consistent throughout the 4 days that we were there, and we asked him, "What do you like to see?" And he said, "Big cats." And we saw lions, and we saw cheetahs, and then we saw lots of other beautiful birds and animals as well. And the gift of just being immersed in that natural environment was amazing, and to be with someone who knew so much history. I don't know if you can quite see the picture in the upper right-hand corner. That lioness was maybe 15 to 20 feet in front of our vehicle, just walking ahead of us. I don't have a photograph, but we did one evening game viewing trip, and we're driving along and came across another lioness like that walking in the road, and she saw us. It's dark, we had lights on. She saw us and headed off to the side of the road. Our driver then pulled the vehicle back and turned it so that the lights would capture her, and there she was, crouched on the side of the road, and our driver hightailed us out of there. He said, "We are not driving by her. She looks like she wants us for an evening snack." It was really amazing and a great and easy way to begin our trip. Our meals were prepared. Our lodgings were beautiful. There's not a photo here, but there was a swimming pool. It was very cold, but my children and my dad regularly jumped in the swimming pool. There was Victoria Falls. It is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, and my family grew up going here. It was a 4-hour drive when I was growing up from our home. It is now a 9.5-hour drive. The road has deteriorated that much in 25 years, and the best parts of the road are where you're off the side of the road and the dirt track on the side is pretty good. Victoria Falls was breathtaking. You can see some photographs of the falls. The picture at the top is called the Big Tree. It is a baobab tree that is hundreds of years old, and just sort of sits and watches over. We had an evening, you can see the sunset, we had an evening sunset cruise on the Zambezi and saw elephants along with all sorts of other birds, and just had a really magical time. Matobo Hills was another place. This was an hour from where we lived when I was a kid in Zimbabwe. It is famous for these rock formations that you can see on in some of these pictures, and for cave paintings. The photo of my mom in red and Ezra, they're looking at this huge sort of cavern with cave paintings in it. And it was beautiful, as beautiful as I remembered it. Some of the rock formations reminded me of some of our rock formations here in northern Colorado as well. And then Hluhluwe was the national park that we got to visit in South Africa, about 3 hours from where we lived in Mfanafile, famous for rhinos, and you can see we had not seen any rhinos on the trip at this point, and we saw 4 rhinos in Hluhluwe, and I had a very happy dad. That was what he wanted, was to see rhinos. Elephants were introduced to Hluhluwe National Park while we lived in South Africa. And so the first elephants reintroduced, I should say, were reintroduced in the late 80s. They are now proliferating. And in a day of driving around the park, we counted 99 elephants that we saw. We had never had a day like that ever again in the 12 years that we had lived in Southern Africa. So animals, scenery, pretty spectacular. But in many ways, these big things were not the major takeaways from the trip. The things that had the bigger impact were the small things. The play of light on a building at the end of a winter's day. 6 weeks for my children to be with their grandparents. The simple things. going and reading books at the library in Bulawayo, the bathtub at the Hyde where you had a view of this area, and we saw elephants walk through there a couple of times. Wordle at the airport, that's my dad and Cora getting their Wordle on the first go. Very exciting. Blowing bubbles, reading, time in the pool. It was the simple things that connected us to each other. It was joining with people in faith and worship to praise the God who is one and makes us one. My mom and I led the worship services in Plumtree when we were there, and preached, and then also at Mfanafile when we were there. So these are photos from both Plumtree and Mfanafile. The photo of me with the giant vat, that is a community soup kitchen in Durban that feeds hundreds of homeless men who live on the streets in Durban. And I wanted a photograph with this beautiful woman who's the cook, and she said, "Oh, why don't you stir the pot?" So I did. And then the stained glass window is from the chapel at Ananda Seminary, which burnt down in the last 15 or 20 years and has been rebuilt. And so those connections with people of faith and being reminded of the roots of my faith. And if you read one of my recent midweek messages, I think is where I put it, did you see that there was a service that was supposed to start at 10 and at like 11 people were like, let's do this? Please forgive me when I'm late. There's a little bit of Africa time just wired in. And then the connections with people. In the middle, you can see me and my dear, dear friend, Senege. She lived across the back fence from us in Plumtree. And the photo below is of her mom, who still lives in that house with me and my children. Being in that yard reminded me of hopscotch. There was a game called Machayana, which literally means let's hit each other. You do use a ball, so it's like dodgeball-ish, yes. But we laughed about how, as a kid, we never got to sit on the couch. When you were a kid, you sat on the floor. And Senege's mom made a meal for us, and we laughed about like the little stools that Senege and I sat on in the kitchen, and how we rarely sat at the dining room table. But those connections. Allie.
Some years ago, two of your friends from Zimbabwe, I guess, got on Zoom for one of our services, and we had a real nice visit afterward. Which ones are those?
So that's Mbali and Lorraine. They are in the middle picture. Lorraine is wearing the bright yellow dress that matches the yellow behind Connections. That is where I would go back first. Mbali and Lorraine's family was the family that sort of took my family in when we moved to Mfanapile. And being there was going home. It was such a gift. We got to stay. There was, it's a house with a bunch of guests, and there was a room set aside for me and my kids. There were two big beds, and I knew, like, nobody's gonna wanna sleep in another bed when they can sleep in mom's bed. So I was gonna be in the queen bed with my kids, and there was gonna be this other empty bed. And so two of the other women guests slept in the other bed, and we just shared the room. There are no ceilings in the house, just walls. So think about what that means for noise at night. And Lorraine and Mbali and several other of their women friends had not seen each other for a while. So the first night we were there, they were up until midnight, laughing and talking, and it was such a gift to be with these women who were just overjoyed to see each other, and who did not feel like they had to literally tiptoe around for their guests because we were simply family in their home. The top left-hand picture is Mrs. Sibanda. She's the library teacher at the high school I went to. She literally looks exactly the same as 25 years ago. I think her hair has changed. But she remembered me from when I was a student, again, 25 years ago. and was the one person on staff at the school that I remembered really clearly. The bottom left-hand photo are the Lloyds, who put us up in Harare, close friends of my mom. The bottom picture, Cora, is with the group of kids who welcomed us. They're part of Lorraine's family. And then the small inset is my brother's best friend's son, Wadi, who is a similar age to Cora, and he and Cora and Ezra love to play together. And believe it or not, Cora got him to leave his phone and the TV to go play with her outside, which was great. And then the bottom right-hand corner is my friend Fungai, who is a writer and social scientist, but really a writer. And she lives in Harare currently. The connections with people was really what made the trip amazing. The place is beautiful, but home is with the people that love us and the people whom we love. It was all the extraordinary and ordinary moments that reminded us, that reminded me that we belong to God, our Creator, that we belong to the whole world, and that we belong to each other. And this is a photo of the stained glass window from Ananda Seminary, and I love the brown hands of God holding the earth with Africa on the front. And then you can see, sort of from right to left, me being baptized by the Reverend B.K. Lutla at Ananda. That was September of 1984. You can see in the middle, me and my best friend, why am I blanking on her name? Tembi, in South Africa. Apparently, I've always loved hats. I got to see Tembi at church in South Africa in Mfanafile when I was there. And then the far left is right after my family arrived in Plumtree, and that's the parsonage behind us. So this trip really gave me an opportunity to sort of integrate all of that into who I am today and who we are together. And to sort of embrace in a different way that you all have a pastor who is white and also Zulu, who is South African by birth and American by naturalized at birth citizenship, and that I really am a global citizen, and that my faith is deeply grounded and rooted in these communities, and that those folks and those who have gone before are with us here as well. Those are little pieces. What questions do you have? What do you want to know? So food delicacies, at the Hyde, one of the meals that they made for us is sadza, which is like a corn meal with a beef stew and a side of greens. It's delicious and it tastes like Zimbabwe. Those traditional meals are lower class, sort of. So most of the time when you're a guest, you get fed rice. When we were at Mfanafile, Lorraine and her family prepared another traditional meal for us that was dumplings, and it's these like breaded dumplings that are cooked in a big pot with chicken and like all of the juices together. And that was along with potatoes and another root vegetable, some sweet potatoes, yams, and then I don't remember, there was a side of vegetables as well. I don't remember what that side was, but lots of tea, and it's the kind of tea we drink at home. It's rooibos with milk and lots of sugar. So my kids were very happy the whole time to have that. Amatlimbi are a delicacy in Zimbabwe. They are fried mopane. They're called mopane worms. They're caterpillars. Because of the drought, they go for $500 for like 50 kgs, which is unbelievably exorbitantly expensive. Zimbabwe uses all US dollars, and it is expensive. Our grocery bills when we went to the grocery store in Zimbabwe were comparable to what they would be at King Soopers, and I'm pretty sure most people are not making a US salary. I mean, they may be making a salary in US dollars, but it's not what we would call a living wage here. Being in Zimbabwe was a little bit heartbreaking. The government has not cared for the country well. And so things like roads and schools, just a lot of the infrastructure has kind of unraveled. If you're wealthy, you can just kind of ignore it and soar over the top. And it's lovely and beautiful, and you don't even notice the destitution and the struggle of lots of ordinary folks. Because of a couple of financial crashes that the country has had, lots of families, ordinary Zimbabwean families, keep their wealth in livestock. And the drought a year ago wiped out people's livestock. So the generational wealth that gets passed on to children and grandchildren, again, wiped out because of drought. And again, if you're wealthy, you show up at a hotel or a private resort and the Wi-Fi is fast and the water is hot and plentiful, and you would have no idea of the struggle that ordinary Zimbabweans face every day. I don't think I have pictures on here. I wish I had put pictures on here. Durban, so we stayed in an area of Durban that used to be exclusively by law white in the 1980s through to the end of apartheid. That community is now predominantly Zulu, and if you go up the hill a little bit, there's a predominantly Indian descended community. Something that's interesting about the so Durban has a huge Indian population. Folks who came to work on the railroads were brought to work on the railroads in particular. One of the things apartheid did is apartheid said, here's your color and your race. Apartheid laws did not care about people's religion. And so India, which is very divided by religion in many ways, the Indian community in Durban, most Indian families have Christians, Muslims, and Hindus who are part of the family. And they are buried together, which is an interesting sort of offshoot in a positive way. I mean, apartheid was terrible. Please don't hear that there was anything good about it. But that's something interesting that came out of apartheid in Durban. The beaches, so the coast of Durban is beautiful beaches. The ocean is beautiful. The first day we went out, there were tons of surfers, just beautiful. We had never been to any of those beaches because they had been white-only beaches when I was a kid, and now everybody's there. I saw women in bikinis and women in burqas, and I saw there were a group of teenage boys of every color playing together. There's still, I mean, people, if you ask, like, how integrated is South Africa? It's like the US, which is to say, not very, but somewhat. And so people can at least legally be together, go to school together, have families together. Yeah. What other questions or comments? Heather? Absolutely, yes. And again, it's like the US where it's not the most common thing, but also it happens. And I saw families that were obviously interracially blended at this point. I mean, it's probably like here, which is to say sort of sometimes depending on where they are. Yeah, great question. Any other questions? Kathy?
So you said there were a lot more animals in the national parks that you visited when you were a kid. Is there a concerted conservation effort to increase the population of elephants and lions?
So the populations are lower. In the 2010s, there have been significant poaching. When we were in the Pride, we saw more lions because we had guys who knew what they were doing and who were talking to each other. and who were there all the time, so had a sense what the movement of different animals was. When I was a kid, we were in our pickup truck being like, which road should we go down? Maybe we'll get lucky today. So that's a difference. And then in South Africa, certainly at Sosluwe, the population of elephants is significantly more than it used to be. There are conservation efforts. One of the things the Hide is doing, and what was wonderful about being there, is it is clearly deeply invested in the conservation of animals. Folks have invested in, and I assume it's been privately done, I don't know. So the water holes in the game parks, many of them have boreholes, because otherwise they would dry up and the wildlife would be dying just like people's cattle. And so the boreholes are wells that keep those water holes full. And that has made a difference in keeping animals alive. But countries, Zimbabwe in particular, with the economic collapse, we would all go to great measures to feed our families. And so that economic collapse has contributed to more poaching in particular. So please don't ever buy anything with ivory. Sort of how we consume can make a difference in terms of conservation and poaching. One of the big things, I don't have pictures on here. So at Victoria Falls, there's a group that's taking care of vultures. And who here is like, oh, vultures, I love vultures. We've got one, yes, way to go, Heather. Most of us are kind of like, meh, maybe somewhere else, they seem dirty. Vultures are a really important part of the food chain, and they prevent disease in particular from spreading. Poachers, after they kill an animal, will often poison the hide. And there was a situation in Botswana where 500 vultures all died because of the poisoning of a poached elephant hide. And part of the idea is if you kill the vultures, then they're not all like taking off and sort of alerting rangers and things like that of where a poached animal might be. Farmers don't necessarily want vultures around their land. And so the vulture population is actually getting devastated, and they really kind of stand between humans and a lot of like icky diseases. So learn about vultures. Every time you see vultures here, be like, thank you, you're keeping our world clean. They're really, really important. So learn some about that and the conservation efforts around vultures, which was really interesting. Allie. So the elephants, what a great question. I don't remember with the elephants. The rhinos all have their horns shaved down. And that is a conservation effort. A lot of what rhinos are killed for are their horns. And when they're let to grow, they grow really tall and beautiful and pointy. And so just filing them down like fingernails sort of deters poaching because it lessens the value. Yeah. It was an amazing trip, everyone. Lee. Where? Yeah, so Zimbabwe has been under a drought. There was a bunch of rain before we got there. But as we know here, a season with some rain doesn't get us back to a non-drought baseline. Water is a precious resource. So some of it is surface runoff and supply. Lots of people have boreholes, but that's tapping into the yes. So that water, it lowers the water table. Our friends with whom we stayed in Harare have not gotten city water. They're hooked up to the municipal water in 15 years. All the water they use is from their borehole. So it's a serious concern. Healthcare, I did not engage. Thankfully, I didn't have to get any healthcare treatment. I have a feeling that it's expensive and not great what most people have access to. Potentially less now than when we lived in Zimbabwe 25 years ago. At Mfanafile, there were water tanks, again, water runoff from like roofs, catchment. People had boreholes. There's a river, and people still go down to the river and bring water up. There had been running water and plumbing, but that doesn't really, the plumbing at least doesn't exist anymore in a meaningful way in Mfanafile. Yeah, I mean, these are poor rural places and where people are struggling. Yeah. Again, it was really meaningful for me to get to go. I feel like I got to integrate parts of myself that like I hadn't known how to do. Visiting Mfanafile was really important. I didn't know. I went back afraid that my relationship with people had been a financial one, that folks weren't family, they were paid to care for us. As a white, wealthy, international sort of colonialist to some degree, right? Like that's a lot of how relationships happen across culture around the world. And I didn't know. And getting to go back and being like, oh, I don't have to speak Zulu, I don't have to be Black, I don't have to be South African by citizenship, and yet there's still a community to which I belong, was really powerful. It was really a gift. And we had fled Zimbabwe, and I had not gotten to say goodbye to Plumtree, to my best friend, to her mom, to our church, and so going back, there was really a sense of closure in a different way, and being able to see ages 14 to 16 were really hard for me, and those were my last 2 years in Zimbabwe, and so kind of getting to go back and just kind of feel in my body what that was like in a different way and get to integrate that differently. I mean, really a gift. And again, you know, those little things of like the gift of watching my kids with my parents for 6 weeks, you know, swimming in cold pools and walking to the grocery store and making lots of French toast and spaghetti. That's what we made for ourselves a lot. Lots of French toast and spaghetti. Super simple, ingredients are available, didn't take a lot of prep time. Those things were just really a gift and a blessing. Rice? There are parts of southern Africa where rice can grow. There are highlands, there are places with more water, and I think some of it's imported as well. Yeah, yeah. I'm going to invite you to pray with me. Holy and loving God, thank you for our interconnectedness. Thank you for the gift of this sabbatical for me and my family to go home and come back to Loveland, which is also our home. Thank you for this beloved community and the ways in which we live into your call to us. May we each know and rest in our belovedness and our belonging to ourselves, to each other, and to you. Amen. I will just add, the last 4 weeks of my sabbatical, I was moving. I have bought a house right next to the Chilson, and so that was, I got to come home in a different way as well, and that was a gift. You're welcome to stop by. There's prayer flags outside. You won't miss the house. If you drive by, you'll be like, oh, it's that one. So thank you. Can I give you a high five?